I'm Brandy.
Sitting here on the porch of this house that was once filled with so much love, I'm reminded of the storm that nearly swept me away. It was during the reading of my mother's will that the tempest truly hit. My father, Henry, sat across the table from me, his new wife, Stella, by his side. They thought they had it all figured out, that they'd walk away with everything my mother had worked so hard for. But they had no idea what was coming. Let me take you back to the beginning. My mother, Amelia, was a remarkable woman. She built a successful real estate business from the ground up, starting with just a small office and a lot of determination. She was kind-hearted, always helping others in our community. She'd organize charity events for local schools and offer free housing advice to those in need. I've had rheumatoid arthritis since I was a teenager. It's a constant battle, but my mother was always there to support me. She'd stay up with me during the painful flare, UPS, massaging my joints and making sure I took my medication on time. Then, one fateful night, my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer. The doctors gave her a year, but she made every single day count. She was in the hospital, her body weak, but her spirit unbroken. She looked at me with those clear, loving eyes and whispered, "This house is yours, Brandy. Don't let anyone take it from you." I thought it was the pain talking, but now I know she was being prophetic. After she passed away, the funeral was a strange affair. Henry stood at the podium and talked more about himself than about my mother. Stella, with her fake tears and designer clothes, played the part of the grieving wife perfectly. I sat in a wheelchair near the back, my joints swollen and painful, feeling like an outsider in my own family. A few days later, Henry called me into the living room. He sat in my mother's favorite armchair, Stella perched on the armrest. "This house, the investments, everything goes to me. I'm the surviving spouse," he said coldly. He slid a quick claim deed across the table, telling me to sign it for everyone's sake. I refused, saying my mother had told me the house was mine. Henry scoffed, saying she was on painkillers and it didn't mean anything. He even went as far as to say that I was a burden, that my mother had only kept me around out of guilt. Those words cut deep, but I held my ground. He threatened to have me removed if I didn't sign by Friday. When Friday came and I still hadn't signed, at midnight, Henry opened my bedroom door and tossed an empty suitcase on my bed. "Pack your things. Find somewhere else to die," he said. I was in the middle of a bad flare, every movement like a knife stabbing through my joints. But I knew I couldn't let him win. I called my aunt, Lily, my mother's younger sister. She didn't ask questions, just said she was coming. She took me to her place, where I tried to figure out what to do next. I checked my bank account and found that I had barely enough to cover a month's worth of medication. And when I called the pharmacy, I learned that my insurance had been terminated. It was then that Lily told me about a lawyer my mother had mentioned years ago. She pulled out a tattered piece of paper with a phone number on it. "Your mother said if things got bad, you should call Margaret Reed," she said. I called the number, and after several attempts, I finally got through. Margaret's voice was calm and reassuring. She said my mother had come to her 3 years ago, right after she'd found out that Henry was having an affair with Stella. She'd been planning for this moment ever since. A few days later, I received a letter from Henry's lawyer, threatening to have me declared incompetent because of my arthritis. Lily drove me to Margaret's office, and on the way, she paid for my medications out of her own savings. At Margaret's office, I learned that my mother had executed a formal will 3 years ago. It was notarized by a retired judge, and there were independent witnesses. She'd also recorded a video statement confirming her wishes. The day of the will reading arrived. The conference room was filled with family members and lawyers. Henry and Stella sat on one side of the table, looking confident. But when Margaret started reading the will, Henry's face turned pale. My mother had left the house, the life insurance policy, the investment portfolio, and all the savings accounts to me. She'd also left a substantial amount to Lily and a donation to the Arthritis Foundation in my honor. Henry was left with a mere token amount. He couldn't believe it. He started shouting, accusing my mother of forging the will. But Margaret showed him the notarization and the video. In the video, my mother looked healthy and determined. She said, Brandy, you were never a burden. You are the light of my life. I've done this to protect you from the greed of others. Stella's performance came to an end. She realized that her plans had fallen apart. She grabbed her handbag and left the room without a word. Henry was left sitting there, defeated. 30 days later, I returned to my house. Henry had moved out, leaving behind most of the furniture and my mother's things. On the nightstand in my mother's bedroom, I found a journal. Page after page was filled with letters to me, written over the course of her illness. In the last entry, she wrote, "You're going to be okay, Brandy." I made sure of it. I sat on her bed, holding the journal, and cried. It was a cry of relief, of gratitude, and of love. My mother had fought for me from beyond the grave, and she'd won. Now I've enrolled in a good health insurance plan. I've started working part-time at a local support center for people with chronic illnesses. Lily comes over every week bringing me homemade soup and stories. And I've set up a trust, just like my mother did, to protect my future. 6 months later, I received a letter from Henry. He wrote that he'd made mistakes and that he missed me and my mother. But I knew I couldn't just let him back into my life. I wrote back, telling him that I didn't hate him, but I couldn't trust him. I told him that if he wanted to change, he needed to start with himself. As I sit here on the porch, sipping a cup of chamomile tea, I can hear the wind chimes my mother loved so much. I know she's watching over me, and I'm finally at peace.